Hey, in this video I continue sharing my Jess Franco collection. I've got a couple of movies here in my hand. I'll go with the 1980s one. If Jess Franco had contact with me, I'm sure he would have dissuaded me strongly from even bringing this one up, because he himself was not fond of this film, since it's a cannibal movie, and Jess was very open about his disdain for the subgenre, and he dissed his own contributions to the cannibal movies as well as the more infamous ones, more renowned ones, such as the ones made by Ruggero Deodato. The movie I'm talking about is Devil Hunter, known in Spain as El Cannibal, and the German title is Jungfrau unter Kannibalen. This movie had some German money in it, so there are some German cast members, and there is a smattering of Italian money as well, because they brought Al Cleaver on board, the Italian star of Zombie Flesh Eaters and Contamination. Oh, sorry, he was not in Contamination. So Al Cleaver plays Peter Weston, private detective, burly private detective who's hired to rescue a kidnapped actress played by Ursula Fellner, and she's been kidnapped by a bunch of bad guys featuring Werner Pohlert, who you might remember from Iguana with the Tongue of Fire. Antonio Mayans plays Al Cleaver's sidekick, the chopper pilot. Antonio Mayans, who's made like 40 films with Jess and directed some of his own movies. And then there is Antonio de Cabo, who was the priest in The Sadist of Notre Dame. From the two cannibal movies Jess Franco churned out around the time, Devil Hunter is the more elaborate one. It has a bit more budget, or at least it has a semblance of being more elaborate, because there are tracking shots that actually bothered to lay tracks in the gardens where they shot the movie. It's not as flat looking as the other cannibal movie with Al Cleaver, where he has his arm lopped off cannibals. Then Devil Hunter has a bit more ambition in terms of framing. It's still a very, very wacky movie, and it's kind of difficult to do it justice within the strict guidelines imposed by YouTube. I mean, it's made to grab a few bucks and not much else. I mean, there isn't much thought behind this production. It's a very not thought through movie, Devil Hunter. There is quite a lot going on there. Continuous drumming on the soundtrack, and for the most part of the movie there is that native music, if you see what I mean, kind of ethnic music. It's really as far from politically correct as you can possibly get. It's very hard not to be offended by this movie. There is an ugly episode of sexual violence in this film, which, to be fair, it's not great. It's really not great. There is some good, crazy cinematography, so you can tell Jess Franco was left alone to do his thing. He could be as creative or as sloppy with the visuals as he pleased. Nobody was breathing down his neck. There is some incredible, beautiful, breathtaking scenery. There is a mountaintop wrestling match between the white hero and the black anti-hero who's nude. So basically you have these two dudes wrestling on top of a mountain overlooking the sea, and the antagonist wears these tennis balls over his eyes and maybe ping pong balls over his eyes to kind of imitate his monstrous deformity. I mean, this movie Devil Hunter, it really doesn't fit into my brain, to be honest with you, which is why I do watch it from time to time. It's so against the rules. This one used to be quite hard to find in any kind of watchable form. This was obscure for a long time. There were some ugly tapes around, and now there are Blu-rays, you name it. There is a British one, this is like an Austrian one. Did this movie really need to exist? No, of course not. None of Jess Franco movies really needed to be there. You know, there is no agenda behind them. They were just there because Jess needed a job, he needed money to pay for his cigarettes, to pay for his hotel bill, for his vinyl records, for his airplane tickets for him and Lina Romay, you know, things like that. Incidentally, I don't think Lina Romay even shows up in this film. I don't think Lina Romay makes even a cameo in this one, but she is the nurse She's Al Cleaver's nurse on the other one in Cannibals, which I haven't got here right now. Cannibals, yeah, that's another picturesque movie which shares a lot of the cast with El Cannibal, Devil Hunter. A wacky comic book which could not have been made today, and it could not have been made by anybody else but Jess Franco, because it's so self-indulgent, sloppy, surprising, occasionally also pretty violent, but in a cheap and careless way. It's got nothing to say. It's entertaining if you find this kind of plots entertaining. Western civilization versus primitive forces. I mean, this is like King Kong. You could say it's Jess Franco's King Kong in a way. I think that's the closest he's come to making his King Kong. And there is another potentially crude and offensive film here, Barbed Wire Dolls. It's a Swiss production, one of the early movies Jess Franco did for producer Erwin Dietrich. This was also one of my early Jess Franco movies, and I remember being really shocked by how slow paced that movie is when I first saw it. But getting into Jess Franco for me was not easy. It was not enjoyable discovering movies like Barbed Wire Dolls, where some shots just go on forever with the camera not really leaving its place, maybe zooming slightly closer into the actor, then pulling back out, but it's basically, it can stay at the same place without really any dynamic changes or anything particularly visually interesting happening. So my original opinion was really low of this movie, and I remember also the opening credits with that monotonous music, I remember it giving immediately this feeling, oh my god, this is so cheap and dreary. I mean, what am I watching? But something made me persevere and surprise. Over the years, I've come to reevaluate this movie. I don't really like the genre, so this whole, women in chains. I like prison movies, but they don't need to be like women in prison, if you see what I mean. Is this like a legit prison movie? Not in the sense that I would define prison movies, but it's a legit Jess Franco film, and there is a lot of his charm there. There is an absolutely bizarre flashback which presents the only known case of make-believe slow motion I can think of, where they run the camera at 24 frames but move deliberately slowly to simulate as if it's running at a faster frame rate. And this is just something, again, the first time I saw that was breaking a lot of taboos to a young viewer as myself, who was still playing a lot by the mainstream rules, who was still believing that movies have to be made a certain way to be movies. And Jess Franco, over the years, got me off that. So he got me into a more accepting mood, and through exposure to potentially bad movies like the Jess Franco women prison movies, I discovered a taste for more art house films, which can also be really dull, but for a different reason. After I got into Jess Franco, I was also able to appreciate those movies, even though they had no prisons, no cannibals, no female vampires, no Morpho, no Frankenstein. Back to Barbed Wire Dolls. It's a skin flick, really. It's filled with just women in rather unconvincing sets. It's easier to appreciate within the wider framework of Jess Franco's output. On its own, as it stands, as an early movie, I don't think it's such a great icebreaker with Jess Franco, because it is a very sloppily made film, especially if you're expecting any kind of responsible filmmaking, again, because there is a lot of comic bookish depiction of violence, but it's completely superficial at the same time. So this was the Jess Franco paradox. He made movies which ended up in adult cinemas, but their plots were so childish, so there is that naive quality, makes it a bit of an odd mixture, really. So I've come to reevaluate this film, and I do appreciate it a lot more now, and I think the performance from Paul Müller, he's pretty good as this tormented medic, and there is that scene where some of the inmates are making a daring escape, and the way it's staged, again, this is just so sloppy and endearing. It's definitely a landmark film of that period for Jess Franco, and a loose remake of his earlier film 99 Women. In terms of traditional production value and things like that, 99 Women compared to Barbed Wire Dolls, it looks like Cleopatra, it looks like Titanic, like Gone with the Wind. It looks so big and polished and just so damn conventional, whereas Barbed Wire Dolls is a real loose movie with some really blurry shots and wobbly camera pans. He's got his fingerprints all over this one, and he also has a cameo as a sick uncle in this one. He's chasing Lina Romay in that weird flashback scene I mentioned earlier. It's definitely an experience. Barbed Wire Dolls is not a movie that plays by any rules. It's not the movie that is out to please you in a traditional way. So there is that. And we have a little vampire treat here, made in Portugal. Made in Portugal on the same locations as a lot of the more celebrated movies, such as Erotic Rites of Frankenstein or Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein. Or Female Vampire is probably shot around the same locations as well. So this here is Dracula's Daughter. I like this one a hell of a lot. It's one of the lesser ones from that period, made from Robert De Niro, but I think it has a great identity, it has a great atmosphere. It could be seen as a vague retread of a classic black and white, the sadistic Baron von Klaus. Some of the same plot lines come back here, but it's a 70s film here, so again, there is a lot more skin, there is a lot less production value, it's in color. There are some fantastic compositions, grand use of wide angle, some really very daring zooms. There is Daniel White kind of playing more or less himself, playing a piano player. Daniel White has contributed so many music pieces to Jess Franco films. This movie has a tiny little cameo by Howard Vernon. He pretty much plays the same Dracula we saw in Dracula Prisoner of Frankenstein. It's the same character, the same cape, and the same coffin in the same crypt, shot probably the same weekend. But the two movies are still very distinct. Jess was so good at it, at somehow giving the same props a different look, I don't know, a different feel. He could just use the same cast in different roles within the same space, and he was excellent at it. So he could contextualize and recontextualize his limited resources with a certain amount of elegance. So as you can tell, I am fond of this one. Dracula's Daughter. It's not got that much, I mean, it's a padded out movie as most Jess Franco films are. You could cut out 45 minutes out of it and it would not suffer badly, because it would just be tightened up. It's definitely worth sitting through. Definitely one of my preferred Jess Franco vampire films. Great scenery, great backgrounds, and I just like some of the characters in this movie. I don't want to go into the plot too much. I just think it's worth discovering for yourself. It's this kind of European adult fairy tale Jess Franco was so good at creating, so I can highly recommend if you haven't checked out Dracula's Daughter. Not a famous, not a celebrated Jess Franco title, but I'm glad to have it in my collection. So that was Jess Franco Collection. Thanks for watching.